Hello and welcome to the Indo GAA podcast. Delighted to have a special guest for today in former Cork manager, former Carlow manager, former Kerry manager, former Wexford manager, John Meyler. How are you? Did I leave anybody out, John?
No,
It's a
you've all the counties there, Michael. And they say I have more clubs than Jack Nicklaus, but look, you're dead spot on there. So good morning, lovely day here in Cork. Yeah,
it's gas. My vintage would say that you have more clubs than Tiger Woods, but your vintage would say Jack Nicklaus.
yeah. Look, I've been around the place. I've been doing this job for 35 years, coaching, different clubs, different counties and that. But I've really enjoyed it. At the moment I'm coaching the Kilmiley under-15s, under-16s. We won the North Kerry Championship last Sunday morning, and I'm absolutely enjoying it. And it's a breath of fresh air with young fellas. Really, really enjoying it. Great crowd of young fellas, really. And it's. I was at two Premier minor finals last night here in Cork, the minor hurling finals. Middleton playing SARS in the minor final, and you had about 31, 32 players on each team, whereas in Kilmiley you have 12-year-olds playing under 16 hurling. Like, it's the demographics are constantly changing within the GA, you know what I mean? And a lot of clubs are struggling then with numbers and that. But like when you see every team last night with probably 30, 31 players. I must send a bus up to Glanmire. Froggy Murphy was in charge of SARS last night, so I might have to go in and get a few players on loan from SARS to bring up the numbers down in Kilmiley, So.
You have a great association with Kilmiley, John, and that's one of the reasons we have you on today. Just we're talking about the Hurling for Tim fundraiser, which is taking place at the end of this month. It's Saturday, 25th of October in Kilmiley and Kerry. Meyler's Legends against Dalo's Stars. You might just tell us a bit about the occasion, John, and just about Tim himself.
Yeah, but look, I have a great affiliation with Kilmiley. I went down there in 2000, really, just went down to have a look, really, and then the way you get assumed within the club, and I got involved, and for the last 25 years I've been up and down. We've won, in that period we've won 10 county championships in hurling, and won a Munster club, beaten in the All-Ireland final and intermediate final in 2021 by Naas. But hurling has really developed there, and I was there at the beginning 25 years ago, and in 2009 then I took the minor team. And Anthony Daly was doing the senior team. So that's the whole background to this challenge match on their match on the 25th of October. But part of that minor team that I had was Tim O'Brien. A fantastic corner forward, cocky little fella, really, really good hurler. And Tim scored the winning goal in the county final in 2009. And won All Ireland vocational schools with Causeway, comprehensive down in Causeway. So Tim unfortunately was in a car accident in 2010. He was paralysed from the neck down, and for the last 12 years up to 2022, his mother and father were looking after him, and sadly they passed away. In the last 3 years, Tim has really been in and out of care homes, care centres, and it's extremely challenging. It's extremely difficult and sad, that his parents were really, really good to him and looked after him. And, he has special needs because he's paralysed from the neck down. So that's where we came in, really. And there was ideas thrown out a couple of months ago there. And Sean Dowling, who was involved in that team as well, in that minor team in 2009, he put together that Anthony Daly's All-Stars would play John Meyler's Legends in a game to try and raise awareness, to raise finance, to raise funds, So myself and Daly and Shane Brick got involved then, and we've liaised over the last few months, really. And Tim's sister Emily and her husband David, in the last 3 years, Emily has given up her job to look after Tim full time, and they've got training in care and training in that area. So they're building a house out in Churchill, it's near Tralee Golf Club, beautiful part of Kerry, and they've developed 3 rooms, really: a living room, a bedroom, and a toilet area. and they're sizable rooms. So you can imagine that somebody, Michael, that's paralysed needs special equipment,
Of course, yeah.
special equipment, and he's getting the most up to date, how will I put it, technological items really that would help him, voice activate certain heating, lighting, all of those things, and that basically what we're trying to do is to bring Tim home. He's coming home on the 20th of October from where he is now at the moment in Galway. But to give him a life of peace, of hope, of independence, of something like that would make life, better for him. And, I know that there's an awful lot of, cases out there that people need help. But, it's just one that I've personally got involved in because he was there with me in 2009, because he played in the minor final, and because he scored the winning goal. And he's a lovely, he was a lovely young fella, a cocky little fecker. I remember one day that we were playing a challenge match here against Éire out beyond Ballincollig in Ovens here in Cork, and I took Tim off at half time, and he gave me an unmerciful rollicking at half time, and I was taking him off and all this. So after the game, and he said, Meyler, he said, look, I apologise for my behaviour there, but it's been tough. And also then in the background, Michael, this couldn't get sadder. Like, his best friend was John Paul O'Mahony, and John Paul played on that minor team as well, and John Paul fell off a scaffolding site in Los Angeles last year, and he died. So, and every time John Paul came home, he visited Tim and he rang Tim every week. So there was a fierce affiliation, between all the members of that minor team of 2009. But in fairness to John Paul, like, he was always ringing Tim and always talking to him, and Jesus, that was sad last year, John Paul dying, because he was only 32 or 33, and it's overall it's a sad case really, and that's why, in fairness to Dale, and Shane Brick and Sean Dowling and all the people in Kilmiley, they've all taken this interest to their heart. So we're trying to raise a few bob really to help him to live more independently, and Emily, his sister, has done enormous work, as well as her husband David. Like, so it's a worthwhile cause, and a lot of that minor team, Michael, as well, in 2009 went on to win county championships with Kilmiley in 2015 and 16, and in 2020 and 2021, and were involved in the All-Ireland Club final. Daniel Collins, Dougie Fitzell, all those guys, and I feel sorry for Tim, because Tim would have been on that team, and he would have been on that team, and he would have participated, and he would have been involved, and he would have won a county championship. But because of the accident, he never got to play in a county final. You know what I mean? And it's a sad case really. But there's hope at the end of the rainbow now that he's coming home, and that, in fairness to Emily and David, that they'll have the house ready. And that's the whole purpose of this game on Saturday the 25th.
Just there's a fundraising page on iDonate /crowdfunder /Hurling For Tim. 19,000 raised thus far. Obviously, if you attend the game, it's just €10 for a ticket. And you're going to see some fair legends, John, by all accounts. Who are we looking at here?
Well, what we decided, Michael, was that we would have a game at 1 o'clock with the juveniles, all the young fellas, all the up and coming young fellas, Mikey Carden, Jack Carden, Ty Diggins, all those young fellas. Then at 2 o'clock we'd have the older fellas, who probably won't be able to fit in jerseys. They'll probably have to bring their own jerseys.
The old tight fitting jerseys are they're not that flattering, shall we say.
I think there was a few narky comments made to fellas that they'd have to lose a bit of weight. But that's on at 2 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock that we'd have the main game. So we're hoping at the moment, that we've inter-county players here from Cork and a few from Tipperary, Limerick and Clare, and Daly is working hard at that, as well as Shane Brick and myself here in Cork. So we're trying to get fellas, to give a few hours, just be there as support. some kind of support and that for Tim, and Tim will be there, and he's really looking forward to the match and to catch up with everybody really. We're hoping to get the match up on Clubber as well, on Clubber TV.
Brilliant.
I've the Mill Street Pipe and Reed brass band coming.
Wow, it's never a big game unless there's a pipe band playing.
No, like I used to love when I was here in Cork playing with the Bars. You had the Barrack Street Band, and Paddy, I can't think of his second name. Paddy used to lead the Barrack Street Band, and Jesus, they were always great. And any of those pipe bands are great before whatever.
There'd be a tingle going down the back of your neck almost, wouldn't it? Like it's not like it.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic, and when your man strikes up the drums and then the bagpipes, and you know what I mean. That they're, in fairness to Marie, in the Mill Street brass band, pipe band, she's offered her services for the day, so it's fantastic of them to come down and Clubber as well to cover it on TV. So, and we have Big Jim. Big Jim Regan is the local DJ, so he's going to do the music and all of that, and the commentary and things like that. We were hoping to have Marty Morrissey, but it's probably it's probably not big enough for Marty, and I think he's in Spain the week before. So he probably won't be recovered after his Marty party.
Good man, another man in a lot of demand. Just lastly, John, for these types of fundraisers, like sport is an unbelievable thing to unite people, isn't it? Particularly in great times, but also when people are going through hard times. People come together from all four corners of the country and will generally do anything they can to help any cause that's going. And obviously, Hurling for Tim is the one closest to your heart at the minute.
Yeah, and there has been a fantastic response on I Donate for Hurling for Tim. There's been, and you can see by the comments and the people put in a donation, and whether it's €5 or €10 or €1,000, people are putting in there. But the GA is a fantastic family. They're a fantastic family coming together to help people. You saw that with the girl down in West Cork, Fela. There's a fantastic response. Dylan Quirk, the Tipperary hurler, and that. And people, I suppose, it's sad. But people are there to help in whatever way that I can donate, or I can give, or I can help some way to make somebody's life and a little bit better. And we all have the use of our arms and our legs at the moment, and we go to the matches over the weekend. We went to Parky Ring last night for the two minor finals. Yeah, and it's fantastic. But Tim is not able to. Tim is in a wheelchair. And it's tough and it's hard and it's sad, but we're trying to bring him some peace, some quiet, some independence, that he can do things himself. And once he's at home, the whole idea is to bring Tim back home for an independent living and bring a bit of happiness into somebody. And that's really what you're doing. That few bob, that few euro would bring somebody a hope, and that there's life there, and there's independence there, and there's peace there above all that. And at least he'll be at home now around his fellas that he was in Causeway School with and all of that, and that he played hurling with Kilmiley.
Well, it's going to be a massive day on the 25th of October in Kilmiley. We'll have all the information about the fundraiser below this episode and where you can donate. John, fair to say you were a bullish man coming up to the All-Ireland final. That was a sore one to take, I'd say. I know you're a Wexford man, a Wexford native, but you've been living in Cork for 50 years. That was a sore one to take, and there was a fair bit of fallout, and obviously Pat Ryan has gone since. What was the fallout to the All-Ireland final like?
Where do you want to start? Look, I suppose it's a few weeks now since the All-Ireland final, but it has been dissected down here. It has been x-rayed. It has been gone through puck for puck. I meet people who say, I've watched the match 6 times and I still don't know where it went wrong. And it was a complete collapse in the second half, really. And you know what I mean? The people down here are disappointed. They had followed Cork. There was great hope, but it probably started, Michael, with the match against Dublin, and Cork got 2 goals in the first 5 minutes, and people saw this 2 goals straight away, that we were just running in and scoring goals. And if you go back then to the 2 matches against Tipperary in the league final and the championship, it was kind of much the same. And, for whatever reason, and I still don't know why Cork collapsed in the second half, Tip found their feet at half time. They found their feet in the second half. And everybody, on the Tip team really gave a 9 out of 10 performance and just improved enormously. And the team that he finished with, Carl finished with in the All-Ireland final, was not the team that played Cork in the league final. That Tipperary team was developing. And yourself and Stapleton were on about that. I remember Stapleton saying 3 times to me, and he said, John, this is not the team that played Cork. This is not the team that played Cork. This is the team that's developing. And he started off with Shelley in goal. And if you go back and play that podcast again, and if you go back and listen to Stapleton there, he emphasises the point that Tipperary were improving all the time. And, Cork made there were a few mistakes. Let's call it that, whatever you want to call it. There were a few mistakes, and they all accumulated into one. And then with just the thing collapsed, and then with just Tip coming back at him in the second half.
It is a mystery still, isn't it? Like, you could analyse it every which way, but it was like one of the greatest collapses in GA history, and maybe in sporting history as well, to go from the position that they were in to being like beaten out the gate almost.
Yeah. Look, I've gone through my own career, and we've sat down here, even with my own young fella, and said, like, have you ever been involved in a game like that? Where maybe that goal just before half time that Cork got was a kind of a false dawn. Like, they weren't really playing well in the first half, and they went in then, into the dressing room, or they just got the goal just before half time, and it kind of glossed over things. And I'd say myself that, look, we're fine. We just need to pick it up. But I'd say in the other dressing room then, where Cal really gave them a dressing down, and you need to pick it up here now. And it was two contrasts really of two dressing rooms really,
The fallout after, John, I know Patrick Horgan was speaking last week saying he felt that they were a bit let down by the Cork County Board, that all these rumours were just out there and left kind of manifest and grow, and people just took it as, truth, because nobody was kind of nobody was washing it down or anything like that, or getting rid of it. What did you make of that? And even
I was disappointed with that, but I was back home, I'd say at 10:30, and I was sitting having a pint at 10:30, and next minute the phone is hopping, says Pat Ryan is back in Glenmire, and somebody else was back in a local pub in Cork or that, and I said, this is bullshit, like what's going on here? And I think that Pat needed to come out and say, this is wrong, this is not happening. But I also felt that, the Cork management and players should have met the public here in normally you meet them in the Imperial Hotel outside the hut on the South Mall. They should have met those, and that would have stopped all of that in a sense. They should have done that on the Monday night, and I think Pat should have done that. If I was manager, I would have insisted, look, we have to face the music here. We have to really, stand up here and say, look, we thank you for your support over the last number of games in the league championship, in the league final, in the Munster championship. You've been fantastic. Every Cork game was a sellout this year. There were, 40,000, 60,000, whatever. Every Cork game was and we thank the supporters. We've let you down, and we've got to go again. And we ask you for your support. And there's no truth in any rumours here at all.
All rumours are probably quashed if a united front is put on the following night and everybody's there and they meet the public, isn't it? It's there was an absence, and there was no one talking, and it was just an absence. And you know yourself, when there's a kind of bit of an abyss, things just grow legs and take on a life of their own. Yeah,
there was a vacuum left there. And that vacuum wasn't filled. And then Monday morning, then the rumour started. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm not into Facebook, and I'm not into Twitter, and I'm not into these chat boards either. But like, my phone is hopping, saying, Meyler, what's happening here? And you know what I mean? Like, there was a vacuum created. And once that vacuum is created, then all types of stories will happen. I think personally that was my honest opinion, that Pat should have insisted on that really and gone to the South Mall and made the presentation to Cork people and say, look, we're sorry, and that's the way it is. And sometimes you just have to face it. And the best way to do it is to stand up and face it there and then on the spot, and really admit, look, we got this wrong. We thank you for your support, and we need to get it right next year.
As a quick segue, what's the maddest rumour you ever heard when you were involved with a team, or something that you'd done, or something that someone had done that wasn't true?
No, I ignore rumours. Michael. I ignore letters used to come here. John Meyler, Cork senior hurling manager, and it would just go straight in the bin. I wouldn't even read it. I don't even listen. You know what I mean? And some people call me ignorant. And I just say, look, lads, I'm not listening to it. I don't care. Rumours are false rumours. I trust. I've an inner circle, and everybody has an inner circle of friends and people that you go to and that you trust. You ignore those comments, and I don't listen to them, and I don't want to listen to them. And if the post comes here and says Cork senior hurling manager, whatever's on it, torn up. And I know, stuff used to go to Parky Keefe when I was involved, and I got to 2018, 2019, and you are going to get shite coming to you in the post and letters and all that, but
Was any part of you ever intrigued just to see what was inside?
Say that again. Sorry.
Was any part of you ever intrigued to see what was inside any of these letters?
No.
Yeah.
And my young fellow went to England in 2018, and I've always said to him, I said, you only listen to the manager. You only listen to the manager. And often at times he used to annoy me because he'd be dropped or something, or he wouldn't be playing at the weekend. I'd say, what's happening? I said, did you talk to Steve Bruce or to Roy Keane or to whoever? He said, what's the point talking to Bruce? He said, or to Roy, what's the point? Because he can just make up the story. I just have to go in tomorrow morning and train harder, that's all. So don't listen to rumours. Don't listen to, bullshit,
I'd imagine as an outside manager, and I know you lived in Cork for years, and you're still living there, obviously. You were probably living in Cork just over 40-something years when you were given the Cork job. You were probably an easy target as well, in a way. And I'm sure there was plenty of noses out of joint about that.
No, not really. Okay. Because I had been involved in 17 with Kingston. I had, I was there day one. I was trained the minor team, the under 16 team, under 20 team. Look, I've been involved here with the bar since 1980. So, a lot of Cork people probably wouldn't know where I'm from or whatever. And they'd say, look, he's a Cork man or whatever. I know I'm not, but, so, look, you're going to get it, Michael. If you're in that position, like Ben O'Connor's in that position, Ben is going to get stick now if he doesn't get it right. So, Ben is tough enough, and Ronan Kernan, they're tough enough guys to be able to withstand that. And that's it. And you just got to face it. It's a results-based business now. That's what it is. So you have to face it. But as I always say, abuse is like a game of tennis. If you back, game on. So don't back or don't bat back. Don't be commenting.
Yeah. There's some people love commenting because they see it online now. I don't know if you're familiar with X or whatever it is, or if you comment, you say something or someone says something to you. If you comment back, that is it. It's a spider's web, and it just goes every direction.
Yeah. And I've a fella I play golf with, and he tells me the shit that's on the stuff, the boards or whatever here in Cork. I'd say, I don't want to know. I really don't want to know. I really don't want to know what you're saying about so-and-so or whatever. It's just a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. And you know what I mean? No, I will listen to GA people or whatever. And you know what I mean? That you can have a decent conversation. I was talking to Froggy Murphy last night after the minor final. We were just only talking about the Middleton versus SARS minor final. And, I'll talk to Froggy. I'll talk to those people. I'll talk to Ronan Kern. You know what I mean? And we can have our opinions, and we can have our difference of opinion. That's fine. I've no problem there. But I'm I'm not going to go on boards and I'm not going to go on Twitter and start commenting on what somebody thinks about me, because half the people think you're mad and the other half think that you're okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's what I say all the time. Just 50% of people want you and 50% don't want you. And
Okay.
that's really.
John, the way the All Ireland final finished up, and just even with the lack of homecoming and everything, did you see what transpired? Did you think that would transpire? That might be would be maybe the end of the road for Pat Ryan? And is it? I don't know. Is it a little bit easier to maybe go back in 2026 with a completely new backroom team and completely new ideas? Or what's your own opinions on that? I personally think a clean slate is not a bad thing, particularly with all the scars and that they would have had from last year, and obviously even using the All-Ireland final the year before as well.
Well, there's a clean slate because there's only two or three people left of the whole setup in terms of the management team. And that Patrick Horgan is gone, is retired as well. So, I mean, like Ben and Kern, there's a lot of cleaning out done in a sense. So they're starting with a new slate, to start off afresh. And I was arguing last night that they won't be given time at the moment because, Pat Ryan has got them to two finals. Cork people will expect an All-Ireland final next year. They'll expect something. You can't go backwards after the last 2 years in a sense. So there's a lot of pressure on Ben there and Corn, to deliver next year. So most of as I said there, the backroom team has gone. Pat Keane, who was with him for 14 years as the kit man, Pat is gone. The masseurs are gone. All those, he has kept Ian Jones, the S&C fella. The doctor is there, Colin Murphy. So, that I would have had myself, that Pat Ryan and Ben would have sat down together and get the best parts of each management team and realise the synergies of those. Like that the experience that Pat and his team would have had, a few of them might have stayed on with Ben, in the sense of the experience of Munster Championship, the experience of the All-Ireland.
It kind of ended sour though with Pat, John, in a way. Like it didn't end up great with the board, and I think when he was going to go, everybody was going to back him and go with him realistically.
Yeah, but look, I moving from Pat Ryan to Ben O'Connor, there's an awful lot of experience lost. And I had done a year with Kingston in 17, and I learned about the Munster Championship, about the 4 matches in Munster and things like that. Like, it was always going to be difficult. It was going to be extremely difficult. And it's going to be extremely difficult for Ben and for Kern now and the lads there, because, they haven't really experienced that intensity before. And now it's coming on. Yes, they've won All Irelands as players, but it's totally different now that when you're in there as a new management team. So I would have had some experience from Pat Ryan in there. But look, that's the way Ben has called it, and that's up to him. It's up to the county board. And, they looked at the backroom staff, and Ben has looked at players and that,
Would you have been a bit lost if you'd just come in as manager in 2018 and you hadn't been there the year before and you didn't know the squad and you didn't know the setup, etc.?
Yeah. I was managing the under-20 team, under-21 team in 2017, and I was also brought in then as a selector with the senior team. But it was great learning in the sense that we were in the Munster Championship. We beat Clare in the Munster final in 2017. You know what I mean? Waterford beat us in the All-Ireland semi-final in 2017 as well. So it was a great grounding in that. Whereas if you're going into that fresh and new, yes, yes, you're going to have energy. Yes, you're going to have all of those things with you. But it's just, there's a few little hidden things that you won't know, a few little hidden things that you won't see. You've got 4 matches now in the Munster Championship coming up, and it's going to be more competitive this year. Or in 2026. So there's a lot of learnings there by keeping parts of Pat Ryan's management team with Ben. But look, it's what they wanted. Then it's his call at the end of the day.
I mean this as a compliment. I think there's an ignorance to Ben O'Connor that might really benefit this squad at the minute.
Well, he's straight. Kern is straight. There's no beating around the bush. They won in All Ireland under 20, beating Offaly in the final in Thurles.
Cheers for that. Good man, John. Thanks for that.
Yeah. But, they'll have learned from that. They'll know what younger players are there in terms of, the players that really won those matches for Ben O'Connor, like the likes of Micheál Mullins and the likes of Ben Cunningham. But they have to step up. So, down here people are saying, who are you going to leave out? Who are you going to leave out? Hoggy is gone. Who else is going to go? Who else is going to go? But the question I would ask people then is, it's all very well said, we get rid of X, Y, Z. But I say, who are you going to bring in? And that's the critical question that Ben has to answer. If people go, then who comes in? Who replaces them? And that's where you really want in as I said there about Micheál Mullins, about Ben Cunningham, they really have to step up from that under 20 All Ireland a few years back. And like if you look at the two championship matches here at the weekend, William Buckley, who was in and out of the panel really last year, he stepped up for the Bars. He did well.
I'd be a big fan of his now.
Yeah, but he was with Ben and with Corn now, with the under 20. So, he definitely will get a go. Saunderson was in goal for Middleton. He'll get a go, but again, like Pat Collins has he has the number one spot. Ben will probably know Saunderson from winning the county here with Middleton 2 or 3 years ago. So he's going to get a go. What he does, I think Ben has 4 questions to answer, really. I think he's got to look at the goalkeeping position. He's got to look at full back position, centre back position, and midfield position, or position.
Okay. So even though the Downies were all stars, full back and centre back in 2024, you don't see it as like a natural thing that the both of them are going to be starting 3 and 6 in 2026.
Well, they were all stars in 2024. And they're 2 superb hurlers. I think there's questions there. That's all I'm saying about Ben's layout. The hurlers are in Cork is not a problem. It's the setup of them and how they play. And I think Ben and Corn will analyse that totally. It's whether you put Robert Downey full back, who do you put in centre back then? Who do you put in midfield with Dara Fitzgibbon? Somebody has to go in there. And, they have the forwards, Barrett, Connolly, Brian Hayes. I think William Buckley will get a go in the National Hurling League, no doubt about that. Micheál Mullins will get a go in midfield. Ben Cunningham will get a go at wing forward. What he does with Tommy O'Connell, Tommy O'Connell played centre-back for Middleton when they won the county 2 or 3 years ago. He's centre-back for Middleton at the moment, and they're playing SARS now in 2 weeks' time in the county final. So a lot depends on that. You look at Jack O'Connor then, who was man of the match on Sunday for SARS against the Bars, but really didn't figure at all with Cork. So, they're there, Michael. It's a matter of probably adapting the team to meet what players are there, if you know what I mean. And I think that's what Ben has really to do.
How many of last year's squad would you expect not to be involved in 2026? We already know there's going to be at least one not involved because Patrick Horgan has retired.
Look, he's looked at players. I know that for a fact, right? I don't think it's a case of just taking everybody out. There's no point taking people out or dropping people out of a squad if you can't replace them with better players.
But can I just say to you, is there a point to be made that there's, a decent cohort, we'll say probably 8 to 9 lads that have, been close and been on all these teams that have been close and ultimately haven't got over the line? And is there, not saying that they need to be moved on or whatever, but is there a certain cohort that may be surplus to requirement?
8 or 9 is a big number. 8 or 9 is 25% of your panel. That's a big number, Michael. Jesus, do you know what I mean? And replace them then with fellas that are better than them. So I think that they've done a lot of soul searching. You as I said to you there, you had your 2 semi-finals at the weekend. You have your county final out Sunday week. You have the senior A final. You have the Premier Intermediate. And it'll be a case for fellas showcasing their own talents and that. I don't think it's a case, Michael, that you're going to get rid of 8 or 9. I wouldn't be a fan of a clear out like that, because like look at Liverpool at the moment. They brought in 5 or 6 new players. They were struggling early on, getting goals in the last minute. Now they've lost the last 3 matches. I think Salah now is not even fitting into the system that they have. But Ben O'Connor is independent enough to know his own house, and he'll want to get that right, and he will.
Just on Patrick Horgan, John, I know you were a massive fan of him during your own spell, and even before and after that. I would say he probably delivered one of the greatest performances I've ever seen of anyone given a Cork shirt. The time he scored 3-10 in that quarter final against Kilkenny, a losing quarter final in 2019. You had said that for his legacy he needed to win an All-Ireland.
Yeah.
Is your mind any different now that All-Ireland can't be won?
No. Do you know what I mean? Never say never. But look, how do you measure success? How do you measure brilliance? How do you measure that? And it's just the icing on the cake. If Hoggy had the medal, he had 4 chances, 4 All-Ireland medals or 4 All-Ireland finals. It's just the icing on the cake. Really, that would copper fasten his greatness. And that question will always be there, because when you come up with great forwards for Cork, Jimmy Barry, Shawnee Leary, Charlie McCarthy, Ray Cummins, going back a few years. Then you go up to Ben O'Connor, Joe Dean, Brian Corcoran. Well, Brian was kind of in his latter years, he was in the forwards. How do you rate Hoggy then compared to those then? Joe Dean took frees, but leave aside the frees. And it'll go back then to Jimmy and to small Charlie getting 5 All-Ireland medals, Shawnee Leary, Lord of Mercy on him. You'll go back to Ben O'Connor, Joe Dean, 3 All-Ireland medals. They had players around them then that copper fastened their greatness. And then they had their 3 All-Ireland medals. I feel sorry for Hoggy that he doesn't have the medal. And that's just... But, there are fellas walking around with 2, 3, 4 All-Ireland medals that never hurled at all, but and I made this point that those fellas then made the fellas that won the All-Irelands, they made them better, and that because of training and that. And you have to have a panel, and that's the reason. I have an All-Ireland medal from '86 in my back pocket, subs medal. I sat in my arse for the All-Ireland final, but I still have it. And I still show it, and I still have the jersey. You know what I mean? I still have it. You cannot take it away from me. I still have it. And I think that All-Ireland win would have put Hoggy up there. You know what I mean? It would have put him up there. But I still think he has been an unbelievable servant to Cork for 18 years. And the amount of work that man done over that period of time that you didn't see, that unless you were in there in Parky Ring or Parky Keep, Hoggy would be there at 5 o'clock practicing, just tapping ball over the bar and practicing. And then you see it on the Sunday and say, Jesus, that's incredible. How did he do that? But he's probably after hitting 100 of them on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday down at Parky Ring.
Stephen McDonald told me a good one, John. He said he was in a nightclub with him one night, and they were having a full-blown conversation about something, and he just took a sidestep in the middle of the nightclub and kind of just put his hand out, and he just jumped back into the conversation. And this is at 2 a.m.
Yeah, no, but it was his attention to detail. And that was it, that, as you said there, he took his sidestep, went off the right hand, or he'd loop around and come back onto his left and just tap it over the bar. And it looks so simple, it looks so easy, but that was the time. But you have to give me a small bit of credit as well, because I was looking after the primary game team in 2001, and Hoggy was on that team.
Good man.
So when he retired last week there, I sent him a photograph of that. I said, this is where it all started. You know what I mean? When he was 13, and there was a fair, I'll send you the photograph afterwards there, but there's a fair number of players on it. It's unreal the way it develops over time,
We'll have to put your hand up in the air, John, and just give a little tap on the back there to yourself.
No, don't.
Last one, John.
Don't look for credit, Mike, because there's a lot of people behind you, Mike. That Egypt, yeah, go on.
Last one. I know you have plenty of opinions. Any gripes you have with the GA or any gripes you have with hurling at the minute or structures or anything you'd like to get off your chest?
You've mentioned the word structure, Michael. And the main gripe I have with GA, and I'm looking at Jarlath Burns at the moment, and I'm getting a small bit worried that he's looking at things that really are not relevant today. I think the most important word in GA at the moment is structure. And the most important thing is demographics. The way life is changing. As I said to you there a while ago, I was at the minor final last night and you had SARS against Middleton. Both teams had 31 players. I'm down in Kilmiley with an under-16 team with 2 under-12s playing. And I'm aware of other clubs around, rural clubs around that are struggling to field, that are struggling to put out a team because they don't have the numbers. And I think it's a huge issue facing the GA now. There's huge housing estates in Glanmire where SARS are based. There's huge housing estates in Middleton where Middleton are based. But there's country clubs struggling, They can't put out a team. I often see there in Kerry that you've 2-3 clubs coming together to form a minor football team. Like, that's crazy, and that's a huge issue facing the GA. Hurling is struggling at the moment in terms of development. Like, it's grand with Cork here. You've numbers. The premier counties that are in the Lee McCarthy are flying. It's when you start to go Joe McDonough, Nicky Rackard, Lowry Marr and Joe McDonough and Christy Ring. When you start going down there, you're now struggling. You're struggling, and it's about demographics. I think they need to look at structures. They need to look at how we get more people involved. How you get more people involved, more people playing, more people helping. It's a challenge. I was on, I don't know where I was on talking, but if managers get paid 20 grand or whatever it is, like that's a road to nowhere really. There are issues there that are not really relevant at the moment.
And basically what you're saying is like getting more bodies on the ground hurling, getting more or maximising the numbers within rural clubs, etc. They're what you view as the real pressing issues.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, Michael. Kilmiley's just, all right, I'm blowing Kilmiley there, but, the amount of work that guys like Padraig O'Sullivan, Ollie Diggins do, Morris Carden, the amount of work that they're doing. And we don't have a housing estate as such in Kilmiley. You've single houses and that. And the numbers are not there. 2 under-12s, Dara Diggins and Kieran Sheehy are playing under-16. Why? Because if they don't play, Michael, we don't have a team. And you 30 on each team last night between SARS and Middleton. And they're all on the age. They're all more or less 17, 18.
Yeah.
And that's an issue that has to be addressed, and about amalgamations, about clubs coming together, maybe, and there are clubs come together. That make 18 or to make 15 players. And that has to be looked at. That has to be addressed. It's all very well talking about other issues, about the integration of the ladies, the camogie, the ladies football and all that. I don't think that's priority really in terms of, from my perspective, of the development of hurling. It's not important. There are issues like that. Paying managers, that's not relevant at the moment. The managers paid, they're given expenses and all that. That's fine. There's no problem there. But you need to look at the structures, and Cork are fine, Tipperary are fine, Clare are fine.
Yeah, see, you can get lost by looking at the big ones. The big ones they're all self-sufficient, generally. Do you know what I mean? It's the it's the Kerrys who are
And look, you know my own county, Wexford. You look at Wexford. They lost 3 players last year because they retired. Jesus, if Lee Chin goes, you know what I mean? Like the role that Lee Chin plays, you can't afford to lose Lee Chin. You can't afford to lose some of these players. And there's a few clubs here, Michael, that I won't mention names, but they're struggling. They're actually struggling in Cork, hurling clubs. And you know what I mean? That needs to be addressed. They're the issues that need to be addressed. You know, Wexford were struggling this year. You know, like you look at Laois, you look at Antrim, you look at Kerry, you look at all these senior teams. You know, they were Eddie Brennan had Laois up to a certain level there a couple of years ago. Wexford were going well, but now they lost a few players out of retirement. Kerry are struggling in Joe McDonagh. Kildare are going well. They won the Joe McDonagh. Why? They've numbers in Naas. We were beaten in the 2021 intermediate final by Naas. Naas had won the All-Ireland colleges, the Horgan Cup in football. They've numbers, people living now in Naas, people living in Kildare because they can't afford houses in Dublin. Those points. I think the GA, you know, the Charlotte needs to look at demographics and how you help, you know, you have to put boots on the ground, Michael. There's no point, you know, the hurling roadshow there, they were going around 8 different locations, Croke Park. It's a waste of time. Nobody, you know, I'm not going to say no one's listening, but you have to look at those things. And if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. And it's the fellas on the ground, the fellas I told you there, Patrick O'Sullivan, Ollie Diggins, Mark Scott, they're the guys that are working. You know, they're up at 6 o'clock in the morning, they're builders and that. You know what I mean? Carpentry and all that. Then they come home at 6, half 6, 7 o'clock. Then they have to go keep the under 12s, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17s going. And you don't have bodies. Say, John, we don't have them. Like, we've a few fellas from South Kerry playing with Kilmiley. You know what I mean? If we don't have them, we're shagged. We don't have an under 16 team. You know, they're the issues. How can we help you? How can we improve the numbers?
John, great to talk to you as always, and best of luck with the Hurling for Tim fundraiser in Kilmiley on Saturday the 25th of October. It's been a roaring success even so far fundraising wise, and I'm sure it'll be a great game. I'm sure there'll be a few could be a few bellies bursting out of jerseys on that day, but it should be great crack, and there'll be lots of big names on show as well. Thanks a million for your time, John.
Michael, thank you very much for your help. And when I asked you to do it, you know what I mean, you responded, and to Alana as well. And look, I really, really appreciate you. Thanks very much.
Good man, John. Thanks very much.
God bless.